Welcome to the College Football Bros. I am Trey Newman. So, if you've been watching our channel or listening to our podcast recently, you know we've been ranking all of the head coaches in each conference. And when it comes to the Pac 12, we all know there's a clear top two at the moment with USC's Lincoln Riley and Utah's Kyle Whittingham. But after that, it gets really interesting. And two of the coaches that are kind of in the mix there are Northwest rivals at Washington and Oregon. You've got Kalen DeBoer and Dan Lanning. Now, I know Oregon has had, over the last couple decades, a little bit more success and been the better program over those years, but kind of ignoring the program success and simply looking at these two new Pac-12 coaches, who is better? At this point, I think it has to be Washington's Kalen DeBoer. In this episode, I'm going to kind of lay out why. So, I first have to say I don't think that Dan Lanning is a bad coach. Really, we only have the 1 year as a data point. You know, even though it is a really good one. Coming in from Georgia as their defensive coordinator, a lot of people argued that it was mostly Kirby Smart's defense down there, and that could be fair. But he was still able to, learn under one of the best coaches, and he could see for years how Kirby developed that program and built them into a powerhouse of a program. So, when you're talking about ranking coaches, it always comes down to the lens you look through in evaluating them. If your criteria of the coaches was strictly, potential or upside, I would probably agree that you'd put Lanning at the top of these two at least. So let's take a look at Dan Lanning and make a little bit of a case for him. His first year as a head coach was mostly a success. He led Oregon to 10 wins, won the Holiday Bowl. They finished 15th in the country. Pretty solid when you consider the first game they got completely run out of the building against Lanning's old Georgia Bulldogs. And, you wouldn't have guessed at that point that the Ducks were a 10-win team. It is important to point out, though, that the two losses late in the season were to their rivals, Washington with DeBoer, and then Oregon State in the Civil War. Against Washington, some critics would point to some debatable fourth down play calling. I'm not completely on board with that, as I appreciate and like his aggressive nature. Sure, you could argue the actual play call themselves, but, it happens, didn't work out. Against Oregon State, they squandered a 17-point lead in the fourth quarter. Not great, but again, so it goes. But in totality, he was able to bring in Bo Nix from the transfer portal, and the offense had a tremendous season. And really, it came down to a few plays. They were a few plays away from getting to the Pac-12 title. Another feather in Lanning's cap is being able to recruit and keep up Oregon's success there. They finished with a top 10 class in the 2023 cycle and won some head-to-head battles for some California players against USC. But we still have some questions, though, about Lanning. How much of the success in year one came from Kenny Dillingham as the offensive coordinator and having Bo Nix? Will they be able to have some of that same offensive success that they had with some new pieces, especially on the offensive line this year? Because it wasn't really Lanning's defense that carried the Ducks to success this season. So can he start to develop the talent that he's bringing in? And time will tell. If I had to bet, I would lean towards Lanning being very successful at Oregon, given the strength of the program that he inherited and just the way he's starting to continue and accumulate some very good talent and possibly being, better than Washington. But as we sit here right now, I just personally love the proven success that Kalen DeBoer has had. So let's start to make the case for Kalen DeBoer here, and that's what my goal here is. He has been very successful in every stop, whether it be a head coach or offensive coordinator. He went 67-3, won 3 NAIA championships in 5 years at Sioux Falls. Now at Washington, what a first year he had guiding the Huskies to an 11-2 record. They won the Alamo Bowl against Texas, finished number 8 in the country. And it's even more impressive when you consider he inherited an absolute mess from Jimmy Lake. That team went 4-8 with one of the nation's worst offenses, averaging only 21 points a game. DeBoer brought in Michael Penix, resurrected his career. he ended up leading one of the most potent offenses in the country. In fact, Penix finished second in the nation in passing yards, and they averaged almost 40 points a game. DeBoer's fingerprints have been all over his team's success. And to prove that, take a look at this graphic showing the influence that he has had on offenses. We look at SP Plus offensive rankings the year before he's there and the final year he's at that gig. All 5 spots you see here, dramatic improvement. At Eastern Michigan as an offensive coordinator, he helped Chris Creighton lead them to their second bowl game in program history. He was the OC for Jeff Tedford at Fresno State in 2017 and 18. Both those teams won the division, won 10 games and 12 games, including 2 bowl victories. In fact, the 2017 team that first year had the biggest turnaround from 1 win to 10 wins year over year, by and large, due to his offense. At Indiana, as the offensive coordinator in 2019, the Hoosiers had one of the Big Ten's best offenses, coincidentally with Michael Penix, but also Peyton Ramsey. Moving on to be the head coach at Fresno State again. His second year, Fresno won 10 games, helped develop one of the more productive quarterbacks the last couple of years in Jake Haener. And I already talked about the Washington turnaround earlier. Bottom line, his offensive turnarounds have led to each team's overall improved success. So, now I'll admit there is a knock or concern. If there is one, it's probably the recruiting. It wasn't bad, but this last class, his first full true class at Washington, he was 6th in the Pac-12. They did bring in 12 4-stars, so there's still a lot of talent there to play with and a lot of pieces back this upcoming year. So the on-field success these first couple of years could lead to, elevating the recruiting there, better recruiting results. But I only point that out because there is a gap between Washington's recruiting and Oregon's pretty elite recruiting with Lanning right now. I'm also curious to see kind of both these programs, Washington and Oregon, how they're going to look in the transition into the new Pac-12 once USC and UCLA leave. Will the Pac-12 get less respect and hurt their brands, or and ultimately end up hurting their recruiting? Will it allow Washington and Oregon to be the top dogs and thrive more? Will they leave for another conference? And if they do, will Lanning or DeBoer's kind of style not fit that particular conference they go to? So, all those elements are a future problem, but definitely something to watch. So thanks for watching this episode of the College Football Bros. I'm sure there are some Oregon fans out there that don't agree, and that's totally fair. You're not crazy to have Lanning at the top of these two. I like I mentioned at the beginning, it just depends on the lens you look through in evaluating coaches. But let me hear why you'd put him over DeBoer. I'm always curious to hear other perspectives. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. We're constantly putting out new content. Thanks again for watching. See you next time.